Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Today we're going to talk about moving our project from out of the making block stages into constructing the quilt top stage. So join us in just a minute and we'll talk about ideas to put this together as a quilt top. See you in just a second. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Hi everyone, and today we are talking about how we're moving from the phase of making the blocks to the phase of making the whole quilt top. And I'll tell you that I have spent the last week racking my brain about the math behind this, and I'm just to the point where I'm just going to start doing what I think is right and make it work. Now, I'd love for it to be completely symmetrical and know that I need 5 inches and 5 inches and 2 inches and 1 inch and 2 inches and whatever. But the more I think about it, the more confused I get. So today we have a couple of issues that I want to discuss with you that I've been thinking about and tell you what my plan is. First of all, if you did not see Wednesday's video, just to bring you up to date a bit, I went shopping last weekend and found out that the white fabric that I used on this quilt was on sale. And after laying these pieces out, I quickly realized that I don't have enough white to finish this quilt and accommodate the large borders that I want in it. Nothing is worse than laying in bed and the quilt not be wide enough or not be long enough. So I want it big enough that it's actually practical to use. So I bought 5 yards of the white fabric, and looking at it against the scrap I had left and the piece in the block itself, it looks like it's a great match. It is the same SKU number, the same manufacturer, but you know, sometimes it can vary a little bit. So you want to look with your eye as well as the facts behind the fabric. Okay, so that being said, I laid everything out and I kind of used this diagram where we've got the big block in the middle and then we've got the 16 blocks that we made around the edge, and laid it out on the bed to see really how big it's going to be. Now, I love the fact that this big block diamond star is so big. And it's really big until you put it on a queen-size bed. And then it begins to be a little dwarfed. So we need to do something to make it look like it's bigger. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to put a border around the quilt. And I think what I'm going to do, I've got a ruler here somewhere. Yeah. I think what I'm going to do is put about a 3 to 3.5 inch wide border of the white fabric all around this. And then outside of that, I'm going to put a colored border. Now, I haven't completely decided if it's going to be the green or it's going to be the blue, or my first notion, and I think what would be my favorite notion, would be to put a border that was blue on the edges and green in the middle. I like the blue, but I like the green a little bit better. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. Now then, once I get that white border and then the colored border, and like I said, I don't know if it'll be one strip, 3 strips, somewhere in the middle. Then it's going to have another white border on the outside of that. And that's going to be what we hook to our 16-inch blocks. There's a couple of things when I laid these out. I really like the continuity of laying them block to block to block. And I didn't think I would like the way that looked. But when you start setting them up like that, they don't look bad. to be touching each other. But I think, again, I like the definition of having each block speak for itself. So I think I'm going to put a sashing between the blocks. I thought about doing white sashing. I thought about doing the green sashing. I did not like the blue sashing. It'd be nice if I had a little strip of blue somewhere. But I think all I have is the big piece. So let me give you a little look at what that looks like. And I think we've got our overhead camera up and running. So let's see what all these look like. And we'll use our new little fabric here. Okay, so what that looks like when you have two blocks. Let's see if we're all lined up. Okay, here's what they look like when they're touching, when they're going to be sewn block to block. And you see there's no margin here between the two. A couple of things that might make that hard to work with is the fact that your seams aren't going to match up. With these, they match up pretty well. But some of the other blocks, well, I would pick the one that doesn't. Okay, here's a good example. These two blocks. These seams don't match up. This seam's got nothing to match against. This seam has nothing to match against. So they're going to look a little out of place that you're not matching anything. And it's like this block is starting and then it just stops in the middle of everything. So I think the best solution is to put some kind of sashing between the blocks. And our choices are, we can put a white sashing, and I would imagine that this sashing is probably going to be somewhere in the 2-inch or less range. Let's see, this little block right here is right at 2 inches. So if we did a 2-inch sashing, it's going to be about like that. So we've got all this space here where we've just got a solid white fabric. That will be helpful in sewing it together because you're not going to have to match any seams. All you're going to do is you're going to cut the strips the exact width so that you can make sure that everything is the same consistent width. Now the other option we have is we have the option of making that sashing green. So that would look like that. And that does have a bit of a charm to it. It makes the quilt very green. It automatically changes it to from a multicolor quilt to a green focus quilt. Much the same way as it would if you used the blue between the blocks. Now the other thing that I noticed, that when you put a sashing between these blocks, it goes from an idea of it being a strip of design to individual blocks of design. So you have to think about, how do you feel about that? Does that work for what you're trying to accomplish? And I can tell you right now, this block right here, I don't think the seams are open all the way. There's much more seams here than here. So we're going to have to work on getting those even. But what do you like? If it were your quilt, would you want it to have the white sashing, the blue sashing, or the green sashing? I like the green the best, but I think that for the overall design of the quilt, I think I'm going with the white. Because the white really makes the blocks stand out. The green is going to kind of draw your attention to that framed green block. And if you put the green sashing in between the blocks, you're also going to have to put a green sashing up here at the top, and more than likely one at the bottom, so that it looks like it's symmetrically framed. The other thing I don't like about that is it kind of looks, oh, how to describe it? It kind of looks to me like a quilt that you might have purchased in a store. A little more homespun than the look that I'm trying to go for. I'm not necessarily looking for something that looks country or homespun. I'm looking for something that is a little more modern in its color choices and creative. So that's why I'm going with the white, to let the blocks stand out on their own. Now we may decide when we do this and we get a few together that it's not working the way we would like for it to, and we may have to change our direction. But initially that's going to be up. And it's going to be somewhere between, I would say, 1.5 inches and 2 inches, because I think 1 inch is too small. 1 inch puts them almost together but not quite, and you're going to be able to still see where those seams don't match up. Whereas if you come to 1.5 inches or 2, the attention is taken off of how those seams are matching up. So that's what's new with that quilt and where we're going with it. I think what I'm going to be working on this week is I'm going to be working on cutting the first large white border that goes around the bigger piece. We're going to square it up and put those white borders on them. I thought about mitering the corners, but I'm not going to do that, because when you start mitering the corners, you have to keep mitering the corners all the way to the edge, I think. And that's going to get very complicated when we start trying to size that middle block to meet with the size of the border that is actually all of these blocks. So we're just going to use some a squared border technique to do it, and I think that will work well for the overall design and consistency of the seams in this quilt. So that's what I'm working on this coming week. I think what I will do is putting on that white first border is really something that most everybody has done. So I think that our next video on Barnstar is going to be about putting on that colored border that's going to go on after that white border. And then from there we can begin to see how we move forward with joining all the other blocks, and size-wise, how big do they need to be. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Next week we will get back into actual sewing. It's been a difficult week trying to do the math, because the math just has always been my friend, but it has not been very friendly this week with this, because every time I think I have it figured out, I start thinking about seam allowances, and there's 4 blocks, but really there's 5 blocks on each side, because that corner block is on both sides, and I just spin around into, oh, I don't know what to do. So we're going to bring that down back into that simple process of building from the center out and see how that takes us. It's just seams. We can always take them out if we don't like them. We've got plenty of white fabric, so we've got a lot of margin for error if we need it. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have not subscribed, please consider doing that. As always, share with a friend, give us a thumbs up, and we'll see you next time at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. I hope you have a great week.